comment period. But anyone who is made during this part of the agenda that are rude and
scale of more intensive economic development, and also to opportunity that those of us in this business view as a place to provide any kind of site-specific comments. But before we can even get to that point, the property's got to be zoned to a classification that permits the uses that we're trying to get PUDs and residential and non-residential PUDs for. So it's this is not the last stop, and so the leaving it zoned R3 doesn't mean that it's not going to be developed. That's incorrect. R3 allows residential development at a fairly intensive level, including multifamily. Last slide, please. So the choice here really is not between development or no development, or between high density and low density. It's really a choice between following the plan or not following the plan. And this is a plan that you all just adopted, or that the county commissioners just adopted on your recommendation. You all worked long and hard on that and gave careful consideration to and balanced various community interests. And what you see here, essentially, this area is centrally located near existing employment centers. It's near major transportation corridors. It's easily accessible by motor transportation. Public water and sewer are available. The utilities are available, and it's compatible with surrounding uses. It checks all the boxes that you need to check in order to have an employment zoning here. So, and these are just some of the reasons why this property is uniquely well suited for this for both the mixed use 2 designation, your comprehensive plan, and the employment zoning that we're seeking. So I'm going to close this presentation with the same words I gave to you last time, which are you need to trust your plan, trust your ordinances, trust your staff, and trust yourselves. And we'd ask that you all approve a resolution recommending this property to be rezoned to the employment classification. Be glad to answer any questions. And Mr. Teague is here, and he attended the meeting with the Parkway. I did not. Mr. Teague is here, and he can explain. He can tell you what happened there. So, thank you.
Very good. Then we'll move on. The next piece, which is when we open up to anyone from the public who speak. I think we have Tracy Portat, our park superintendent, back with us today.
Sure. I'll wait till.
Yeah, sure.
Just in case. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Tracy Swartout. I'm the superintendent of the Blue Ridge Parkway, 469-mile national park unit located here partially in Buncombe County. Thanks for the opportunity to connect with you again. I put together a very short presentation this time because I gave you some introductory information last month and won't do a history lesson again. Next slide. Just a reminder of the mission of the National Park Service. Basically, we're to protect the resources, cultural and natural, for the future and give people an opportunity to connect with them. Next slide. The Parkway is nominated to be a National Historic Landmark District, which is the highest degree of protection that we provide to any built infrastructure in the United States. Next slide. Some of the contributing features to this nomination include the existence of roads, tunnels, and the significant number of overlooks, including many of which are in Buncombe County. Next slide. This is a look at some of those overlooks, and one of the overlooks is the French Broad River overlook. Next slide. These are some photos from the French Broad overlook that look into the property that is being recommended for zoning change. Some of the features that are existent in these views are the defining features that were important for why this overlook was created and are essential to the nomination as a part of the National Historic Landmark District. Over time, we've done a number of studies on the impacts of the changes of the view sheds from the overlooks, and each and every time we've shown that degrading the overlooks degrades the visitor experience and minimizes their opportunity to have value from the existence of their national park site. It also reduces from the qualities that are being protected by the National Historic Landmark District. Next slide. This is a view, and that's in your packet if you want to see the text a little bit closer, of the view from the French Broad River overlook into the lower part of the tract. Next slide. On this slide, you can see this is the existing zoning, primarily within the view shed of this important overlook on the parkway, is the existent zoning of residential low density and R3. Next slide. With the change in zoning, much of what you would view would be in the employment district. There are a number of uses that need to be considered about whether or not they're appropriate. Certainly, the proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan. I think the comprehensive plan is important. But in addition to evaluating whether or not it's consistent with the plan, the other important thing to do is to determine whether or not it's consistent with the neighborhood for the specific zoning change that's being recommended. In this case, the zoning would, right now, allow for a maximum height of 35 feet. If changed, this zoning would allow a maximum height of 90 feet. The slides that you should look at are the slides associated with the present views from the French Broad overlook into the subject property. While it certainly can be developed now, while it isn't, it certainly can be developed now. It isn't. At some point, we understand that it will be. But the question is, what's the nature of the development that Buncombe County would like to see for the future of one of the most important overlooks in Buncombe County? Certainly, a change in zoning would allow for a wide range of things to occur there that may or may not be consistent. And I would point you to section 78641 on permitted uses within the county's code for a list of the things that are presently not allowed in residential low density and residential 3, R3, versus what's allowed in employment. There are a range of things that could happen here that perhaps are inconsistent with a national park in your neighborhood. The decision is forever. The zoning change would exist whether we have the present applicant or a future landowner. While we understand there's no plans for the lands to change hands, they could. While we understand there's no plans for there to be a 90-foot tall building or a range of the other things that are presently not allowed, they could. And that's what this change in zoning would allow. Certainly, at every step in the process, we have the opportunity to guide this. The existing zoning would require review of plans later, just as a change in zoning would. The question is whether or not that zoning of employment is consistent with the National Park Service site. Now you can see that there is a purple shaded area, and that's the overlay of the National Park Service, and we appreciate that the county has that. As we discussed in the October meeting, the county has plans to review the Blue Ridge Parkway Overlay District. We understand from this body that it's important to you that the Blue Ridge Parkway Overlay District be reviewed to determine whether or not it is achieving the goals of the overlay district. While the decisions on that have certainly lagged behind the decisions on the comprehensive plan, one needs to determine whether or not, before you make a decision on this zoning change, we need to finalize the Blue Ridge Parkway Overlay District. So my recommendation would be, before we forever change the view shed from this very important overlook, we determine whether or not we ought to first revisit the Blue Ridge Parkway overlay. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Madam Chair and members, for allowing me to come back and speak with you, as well as the opportunity to visit with the Blue Ridge Parkway and their leadership. It was a great meeting. I know you're making a technical decision based off of the comprehensive plan today, but I thought it would be worth you hearing the heart of Biltmore Farms and myself and what we're trying to achieve. I've lived in Western North Carolina for approximately 20 years, and I came here to lead economic development for the region as the executive director of the EDC and eventually as the COO of the Asheville Chamber. And now I'm privileged to serve on the board of the Asheville Chamber, and as well as other boards here in the state, the state's biotechnology board, or the recent NC Innovation Board that helps community colleges and universities. The only reason I tell you these things is because the thing that has always compelled me is the ability to change the trajectory of people's lives in a positive way, and that people deserve the opportunity to have careers that they can be proud of and have economic mobility here within Western North Carolina, and that they can go as far as their work ethic would allow them to go. And this is exactly what the Buncombe County Strategic Plan calls for and what the comprehensive plan is seeking to implement. While the desire may be to leave the property undeveloped, I also believe that Biltmore Farms has been a good neighbor to the Parkway over Biltmore Farms' 125-year history, and the Parkway is about to celebrate 100 years and has been through this area since the 1960s. Our paths have intertwined, and we've currently have developments that are immediately adjacent to the Parkway. Our developments, such as the Ramble, I believe are soft developments that are good neighbors. Unlike some of the developers that might come here from out of town, we must live with the decisions that we make and the developments that we have and face our neighbors in the good and the bad. And we care about how each and every acre is used in this community. I think you can look back at our work and you can judge us, and you can see the 5 tenets of our company, which are education, healthcare, economic development, arts and culture, and environment. And you can see those tenets in each one of our developments. And while we have no specific plans, you don't have to look far to see our values of sustainability. We've created greenways. We've married nature and development goals. At least in this application, you can see that we've left the portion on the riverfront as RLD and not even requesting to try to change that. You can see our partnership even recently in the bridge that was built with the Golden Leaf and multiple entities around this area just to get that developed. We will continue to keep these values at the forefront as projects do come forward. Likewise, I will be aware of my commitment that I gave to the superintendent, that I will personally come and speak to her before a project comes to fruition, or we will have that conversation with them. The current zoning allows for certain types of development to happen already. What we are asking for is the ability to be ready for high-quality, career-centric opportunities. Thank you so much.
Now, I guess, before discussion, and I have, I guess, a question for both of you. Can you tell me, or expound on what conclusions you came to from your meeting together that you didn't have prior to that meeting?
I wouldn't say that I have any new conclusions after our meeting. It was great to meet with the county. I think it shows the county's dedication to the Blue Ridge Parkway, and I think that's really important, and we appreciate that. We understand that Biltmore Farms is a good neighbor, but we didn't change our opinion after the meeting about the risk that this potential zoning change could provide to this important overlook. Thanks.
One of the things that struck me during that meeting is it was a very cordial and good meeting. Is two things. One is we offered, before a project starts to move forward, to go and have that conversation with the superintendent and her leadership. And I think it was also a good moment of communication. I think this board asked us to go and establish that, which had not been in a significant way. I think it was an opening for us to continue those communications.
In your conversations, you mentioned that you would go before them before a project is started. Are you saying that once the project is started, regardless of your conversation, that it's going to proceed?
I may not, if you're asking,
Is your mind already made up when you have the conversation with them?
no, we don't have a project to be having that conversation,
No.
but
What I'm saying is, you said that before going forward with a project, you would have a conversation with the superintendent. Upon having the conversation, is your mind already made up as to that you're going to proceed, and you're telling her or informing her
Yeah.
as a courtesy?
I understand your question now. What we're talking about at the time is when we go speak to them, at this point in time, we're talking about rezoning. So, do you want to rezone it or not? At that point, it would be, hey, could we move the project? Could you have a vegetative screen? Could you do things that would help with their goals as well as our goals? I don't think that we're looking to go seek permission to do a project or not, but I do think we're trying to go be good neighbors that would be helpful in what they're trying to achieve as well as what we're trying to achieve. Exactly what I was saying before, marrying nature and development together.
One other question. Like you're saying, residential development in terms of the one that I think Biltmore Farms is doing a project on Sweeten Creek across from,
That is not our project.
that's not your project.
No. We did sell that property to that project that did occur, but we did reserve the top portion of that property.
I think you're referring to the Busby development. That is one. It's at Flournoy. It's doing that?
Yes, that's them.
So Flournoy has done a number of multifamily projects. I will say on that particular project, it did have to go before the Board of Adjustment through what's called the special use permit process. And as part of that, there was a significant conservation easement that Biltmore Farms was a part of. The development sought to cluster development in the least environmentally sensitive portion of the property. and reserve sort of those higher elevations, especially adjacent to the parkway, in perpetuity through a conservation easement.
I have a question, I think probably more for the superintendent, but feel free to answer anybody. The blue area on your last slide, that is where, if I'm reading this correctly, that is where maximum of 90 feet height would be permitted. And it's on the ground, that's correct?
So the way that we understand the zoning request is that the entirety of the property, with the exception of a small sliver that's adjacent to the river, which would remain in residential low density, that the remainder of the tract was proposed for EMP district. So while you can't see all of the blue because some of it's shaded by the parkway overlay, that is my understanding, is that the entirety of the property is being, on both sides of the parkway, is being proposed for EMP, with the exception of a very small sliver, which is represented in green, which would remain residential low density.
I'll call it purple, 40-foot height along the side of the parkway. Am I reading that right?
So the purple area indicates this linear distance from the center line, for which any tracts that reside within that, they are beholden to the Blue Ridge Parkway Overlay District. Within that, our understanding is that within 1,000 feet of the parkway center line, there are is it adjacent to the center line or adjacent to the parkway boundary?
It's adjacent to the center line, I believe.
Right. So within 1,000 feet of the center line of the road, building height would be 40 feet, and that would exist in any of the zonings. However, beyond 1,000 feet, it goes up. Notable is that the view from the overlook would be into properties that are beyond the scope of the existing overlay. So you can see that much of the view from the overlook is into areas not covered by the overlay. Hence my recommendation that we revisit the overlay before we make a decision on zoning change.
Questions. This area right here, I think is what we're talking about. Is this the visual overlay that you are projecting?
That's correct. That was created from our team determining kind of what you could see in those two photos that we kind of showed looking left and looking right into the property. That would be the area that would be expected to be seen while standing at that overlook.
And another question, I guess what I'm hearing from two meetings now is a concern over 90-foot height as a departure from what the zoning is at present. Have you talked with Biltmore Farms about that specific concern? Have you attempted to work out with them some features or, you know, some ways of mitigating that from the Parkway's point of view?
We did discuss this at our meeting, that the height was one of the things that we were concerned about, in addition to the range of uses that could be afforded to EMP as opposed to residential 3 and residential low density. We didn't really come to any sort of agreement. I did hear that there are examples of kinds of development that would be allowed within EMP, maybe even likely, that wouldn't be expected to be 90 feet. But certainly with a zoning change, you could allow 90 feet.
And then also noise. Some manufacturing necessarily involves an increase in ambient noise. Was that any part of your discussion? Is that an issue for the Parkway?
It is an issue for the Parkway, night skies, sounds, and all of that. My understanding is that the EMP district does eliminate some what I would call noxious uses. That's my own language. There's some language in the EMP that's regarding uses that would be difficult. There could be impact on the Parkway of any development adjacent to it, related to lights, related to noise. There are some features of the Parkway overlay that involve screening and planting. Those are some of the things, again, that could be revisited in a review of the Parkway Overlay District. Because, as I mentioned in our last meeting, that overlay district has been there for a while, and it does protect from the center line. But many of the important features on the Parkway are not just at the center line. They're in these overlooks and developed areas along the Parkway. So, for example, you go well out from that center line when you're in one of these viewpoints, and you see things that are well outside. We know that development will occur. The issue here is just the zoning of this very immediate place. And the last thing I'll say is that this is the only place on the Blue Ridge Parkway where you have a view of the French Broad River. And that's the reason that this overlook was created.
Thank you. And if Biltmore Farms would like to address that same question, I'm open to that.
We did have a conversation about height. I understand that the zone allows what the zone allows. I think this is where the conversation comes in around a project, to have that discussion. If you can imagine, one of the incredible manufacturers that are out there, of Pratt and Whitney. It's 55 feet at the tallest peak, and majority of the building is around 40 feet. So you can get a sense of what could be out there. In terms of light and noise, if you look at some of the CCRs that we have recorded and intend to continue recording, is we have light is a concern, and we measure it from the property boundary or the parcel boundary, as well as noise. And so it may be even more restrictive than the county's ordinances.
Sir, you said that Biltmore Farms has developed several properties. Like you mentioned, the Rambles. Do you have any more examples of properties that you've developed that immediately affect or?
The Blue Ridge Parkway?
Yes.
Well, I think we're probably, as linear feet go along the Blue Ridge Parkway, the largest landowner immediately adjacent to the parkway in Buncombe County. I think the Ramble is probably the most significant development, with, I believe the Ramble is approximately 1,000 acres adjacent to the parkway. But that would be the most significant example I have.
Can I ask staff a question?
Yes, and I do have some technical considerations to also bring to your
Alright.
attention whenever that time's appropriate.
Yeah, So, staff recommendation is that we approve the rezoning.
That's correct.
That is correct. I'm looking at this as maybe a simplistic lens. 90 feet seems high, particularly in an important view shed. So is it possible to summarize
Mhm.
what the staff discussion was
Yes.
and how you came to your approval?
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I think is needed at this point. Let's start with comprehensive plan. Actually, let's start before then. Let's talk about the existing zoning now. It's important to note, it's a sort of a mixed bag in this area, both north and south of the Blue Ridge Parkway, which bifurcates the property itself. So to the north, you have the Pratt and Whitney facility that's located already currently in an EMP zone. You actually cannot see the facility from the parkway. Specialized manufacturing, even though EMP allows for a higher height, you just don't see in a specialized manufacturing scenario that sort of height requirement. Right now, as it stands to the south, R3 is the largest zoning district within this area we're talking about specifically. As it stands now, you can do a number of things in R3, including an apartment complex. You could go to the Board of Adjustment, and the Board of Adjustment routinely has to vary the height in order to allow for multi-story apartments. Even though the height standard in EMP is what it is, it's not, you wouldn't necessarily see it in a commercial setting. We do not have, and we're just not seeing anymore, the more heavy industrial uses that have occurred in the past. We are seeing more of a transition to specialized manufacturing, outdoor economy, those sorts of uses themselves. In regards to the lay of the land to the south, you are encountering bluffs. So at that overlook, you're looking out, you're at, I believe, 2,100 feet at the overlook. If you look out at the bluffs across the river itself, the highest peak above those bluffs, 2,186. Doesn't mean that those bluffs are going to be developed. It doesn't necessarily speak to those particular bluffs engaging in that topography as being the most developable areas. You might have something tucked behind the peak and pinnacles of the bluffs themselves. You also have to remember too, there are pretty significant high voltage power lines that also transverse the property as well. We do have a robust outdoor lighting ordinance. Noise is tricky in our area. We all know how noise carries. You can be in a commercial corridor and it can carry to the higher elevation properties. But I think what we have to really look at in terms of what staff evaluates is the comprehensive plan in relation to the future land use map, which is the growth, equity, and conservation map. This area is appropriate in terms of their request. It's adjacent to employment already. And I think the hardest thing that we all have to deal with, understanding that we are a bit of a national treasure in regards to everyone wants to come here, experience the parkway, our forests, Biltmore Estate itself, all the different things that bring people here, is we also have to look at opportunities where it's appropriate to look at employment centers that pay good wages.
When you say
And
good wages?
Yes.
Are you saying a living wage or a good wage? Because the president said 20 years ago, he came here and was on the Chamber of Commerce along with some people. And over the last 20 years, we all know that Buncombe County has lost significant jobs that pay good money for people that could have a affordable living, to where we're now transitioning to catering to tourism dollars. And you're bringing in a lot more servant jobs, a lot more servers and hotel jobs, which pay significantly less.
okay, so we've been a tourist economy for many years. With the establishment of Pratt & Whitney to the north, I think you are looking at actually good paying jobs that are not in the tourism sector. I think Buncombe County has done a lot to try to reserve lands that are appropriate for more opportunities other than tourism. So that was certainly a consideration when we put together the growth, equity, and conservation map. And this request is consistent with looking at that map and evaluating the request itself. So that's where staff had to look to in regards to the height, those sorts of things. If you go through a quasi judicial process, which the Board of Adjustment does every month, they have standards that they have to follow, and they have to assure that you have more of the conversation about harmony, character, that sort of thing. I can't think of the last EMP zone property where we had specialized manufacturing that utilized the full 90-foot height requirement. There are also the ability for a developer they have to agree to it, but they can agree to higher standards. So you might see the ability for them to bring a project that has to go to the Board of Adjustment and agree to, hey, we're not going to exceed 50 feet. That can be done through our current process. I think that the overlay itself that we've had intact for many years, it's not a prohibition overlay. It's an ability to soften development within the vicinity of the parkway itself. But overlooks are very tricky when you have an urban interface, i.e. a city in the middle of a thriving county, and you're trying to protect that in addition to the overlay. The overlay never really considered view sheds themselves, because view sheds are problematic. Everyone comes to the planning department and wants their view protected. And it's just not something that we can readily accommodate. I mean, if you think about it, every view that looks down into the city of Asheville, or every view that looks out into it, not everybody's afforded that. So it's one of the trickiest things that we have to deal with as a staff. So that's what I would say to staff's analysis.
Thank you for that. Just a quick follow-up question to the staff. Have you had a chance to form an opinion on the superintendent's proposal that we revisit the overlay before?
It's part of the comprehensive plan itself. When we revisit the overlay, I do not think it is going to accomplish the things to protect every single view. It's not something that we can accommodate with our scarcity of land. Yes, we can look at improvements to it. Yes, we can reevaluate the current standards, but I do not see significant changes in regards to view shed protection.
What about this specific view shed? Is there possibilities or abilities to try to protect this particular one, since, as you pointed out, it's the only view shed at the French Broad?
I think we're going to have to be really careful here because my concern goes immediately to an argument regarding regulatory taking. I think that, this is really difficult because it's a legislative hearing to change zoning. It is not a development proposal. So it is hard to know what Biltmore Farms may propose when they get to that opportunity. I just don't see that we could do much here that would preserve that specific area in a way. I mean, there are things that can be done in terms of additional screenings. They may choose to set the development back beyond that pinnacle, those peaks and pinnacles. I'm just not quite sure what we would offer in regards to this particular overlook itself, where you wouldn't see some type of development, depending on where it is. I mean, right now you could do a manufactured home park. You could do any number of things that potentially could be even more detrimental than like a specialized manufacturing box. There's color palettes. There are things that can be employed that could soften development in this area.
I have a comment, or a question, if that's okay. We all, everybody, this table, and that table took part in the comprehensive planning process. And I think it's important to all of us that in the early days of using that plan, that we get it right to the extent we can. And so my inclination is to respect the decision and recommendation of the planning staff, because I know you didn't do this casually.
I would kind of dovetail on that and say I agree with Ken, but it's also important to realize that the plan is not made of stone and concrete, and it balances a lot of different interests between employment and preservation of farms and housing districts, in addition to land use for people to get out and hike and all that. So there's a balancing there. And I think that's what we've been trying to do for the last two meetings here, is to not only be true to the plan, but we also have to be true to the balancing that's in the plan. And this is the biggest high stakes balancing act probably in the whole county. And we would like to see you guys doing the balancing. I have been a lifelong resident of Buncombe County. I lived here at a time when there wasn't employment. I remember a time when you could apply anywhere and not get a job and be worried. At the same time, I grew up on the Parkway. I grew up in the National Forest. I grew up fishing. And so I understand the balancing act that has to occur here. And I guess this board just seeks more assurances from the parties that are before us that you will be responsible and you will make sure that balancing act occurs. One of the biggest comments I heard last month was, I don't want to be the vote that ruins the Blue Ridge Parkway. And I sort of have to echo and agree with that. The Blue Ridge Parkway, the Biltmore House, these are all things that make Buncombe County wonderful. And yet one bad vote that allows one awful development to come in as a part of that balancing can ruin the whole thing. And so we want to know that there's a certain amount of responsibility occurring. And part of that's communication. And part of that is more than just communication, as he pointed out, it's a genuineness to work with the other side to make sure you don't ruin the Blue Ridge Parkway. I drive it all the time. I enjoy the Blue Ridge Parkway. I practice in the federal court system and handle lots of federal court cases. And so I have to get on the Parkway just to see where these things are and how they occurred. And I've learned even more about the Blue Ridge Parkway over the last few years. So the balancing is just an important thing for us. We know that Biltmore Farms has done great developments in the past. They've come right before this board. We've seen them. We just want to make sure this one goes well. And so we hope that you will give some consideration to that view shed as you go forward with whatever you do in whatever zoning that you have.
In respect to the planning board's decision to approve this project, when I look at this picture, I've looked at it, I've visited, probably hundreds of times as a teenager. And my concern is, what are my grandsons gonna see? What are my great grandsons gonna see? For me, I understand development is coming. I understand the change is coming. But change is always not good change. It's not always positive change. And at this point, I think we have it's a tricky road to determine what this site will look like in 100 years. I understand the comprehensive plan and how we accomplished it, but I'm starting to see now that maybe there's a few loopholes, a few unseen items that maybe we could have addressed a little better. And I'm sure as time goes on, that's going to be exploited even more. So, I really wish that the Parkway and Biltmore Farms could come to a consensus. An agreement.
Yeah, I got a kind of comment here. I don't mind, you're a landowner and I don't mind what you put on. You've already spent all this money to do it. And if you get to this point, you've already kind of in the back of your mind know what's going to happen. Looking at where this view is, I went out there and drove it myself. And even with all the leaves off the trees, you still can't see Pratt and Whitney out through there. And even you look at the topographical map of it, where the view is and the way the land overlays, there's really no way you'd be able to put anything there at all. If you're looking at, goes from 2180 to 2020. So you're looking at 100 feet within, or something like that. And usually, if they're going to put something there, the planning board, or not the planning board, the board of adjustment would turn it down because it would be considered steep slope, wouldn't it?
No, it's not in the steep. You have to meet a couple of different criteria to be steep slope. Now that's getting back to what I was saying. Is it really truly developable? It is quite a bluff there. Now, typically, if you look at to the north where Pratt Whitney sits, it laid on those knolls. They had to lay down a couple of those knolls, but it laid on the knolls. If you look at where the county wants to develop on our Ferry Road property, we stayed away purposely from any slope greater than 25%. Steep slope overlay is actually 35% and greater than 2,500 feet. So it doesn't meet those two criteria. But again, you're dealing with significant bluffs along that river's edge. Then you've got the high voltage power lines behind them. Now, behind that sort of sloughs down, and then you get more of a bowl effect, which is why you can't see Pratt and Whitney.
And I mean, it's just, I've even walked all over these. I was a fireman back in the 80s, and I've spent many nights on Old Fort Mountain, all the way up into Madison County. And I want to keep everything preserved too. It's just, I'm trying to keep the difference of what you can see and what you can't see. And a 90-foot building, the price tag on a 90-foot building today is extreme. So if they're going to go to 90 feet, it's going to cost a lot of money to even get a building up to 90 feet. A 40-foot building is pretty pricey too. But I just wanted to go up there and look and see what was going on up there. And I went up there and looked and got out and just walked around a little bit. And that's one thing I was just wondering about.
In Kansas Center. We've all lived here for quite a while. I've lived here my whole life, basically. I remember what it was like when all the manufacturing left that had been here way back when. So the importance of jobs And well-paying jobs can't be understated, and the need for that in the county can't be understated. On the other hand, the mountains are what make us who we are. And so it's a very difficult choice, no matter how you're looking at it, is to rank one above the other. I don't think you can do that because people need jobs to live. We also need what the Parkway provides to live as well for our spirits. So basically that brings us back to the trust that we put in not just the planning staff or ourselves, but in the other members of the community, such as Biltmore Farms as well. And I have no reason to doubt any of that trust. So as difficult as I think this is on a number of levels, and as much as all of us want to preserve everything we can preserve, I think we also understand that development is going to happen, one, because it has to happen. It's not even a matter of whether we want it to or not, it has to happen. People live here. People are, as long as people are being born, people are going to be living here, and they're going to need land, and they're going to need jobs. So that's sort of where my thoughts would sum it up, and sort of where I think maybe we're all going to with this. So that brings us to, is there any further discussion, I guess I would say.
Is it the 90 feet height? Is that what we're really worried about, or is it just anything else that either one of y'all? Is that the main concern, is the height of the building? The rest, everything else is fine, right?
No, I appreciate your question. So yes, one of the things is the 90-point height. Here are a set of other things that are presently not allowed in RLD or R3. There was a slide that was shown just a minute ago that showed where the existing zoning is. So things that are not allowed in R3 but are allowed in the EMP district include adult entertainment establishments, amusement parks, asphalt plants, cargo freight terminals, concrete plants, funeral homes, greenhouses, commercial industry, hotels and motels, junkyards, mining and extraction operations, conditionally, of course, motor vehicle sales and rental. So, and I'm to the M's. There's a whole set of things that are allowed within the EMP district that are not presently allowed in the green R3, which makes up the majority of the view.
Regarding the issue of trust, and I appreciate you all's concern about that. It's what I advise. I appear frequently before the Buncombe County Board of Adjustment, and one of the questions that comes up is, have you talked to your neighbors? And I would advise any of my clients in a situation like this to talk to people who are going to be affected by this, and see if you can get their buy-in or at least their understanding to what you want, or see if there are things you can do to help them get behind it. And so I would suggest, I'd say to you, and I would say this to whether to anyone who owned the property, is that's a very important thing to do. It's going to be important to the board. It's important to your ability to operate in this county. And as Mr. Pennington pointed out, because of a lot of things that we don't really control, the potential for a 90-foot building is negligible, I would say. But doesn't mean it can't happen. But for manufacturing processes, you're not going to have a vertically oriented development, and there are some topographical challenges here that make any kind of tall structure difficult to do. Be glad to answer any questions if you all have them.
However, after the rezoning, you could put a hotel there.
If it is rezoned to employment, then yes, it is available for all the uses that are available in that zoning classification. And does that mean they're going to happen? No, but it does open up the range of uses, but it is consistent. And I would suggest it's way more consistent with the comprehensive plan than the R3 zoning classification is.
I wasn't aware till just a while ago that Biltmore Farms has actually sold property to other developers. And that's a potential for this property that the zoning could be changed, and 40 years from now, it could be sold to another property owner who might then use the 90-foot aspect of EMP. Can you address that?
Well, it's like I closed out my first presentation with is, you need to trust the plan here and trust the ordinance, trust your staff. It's
It's a balancing, and
yeah,
we're trying to balance here.
correct. But I think that anybody, and you're absolutely right. That the property could be conveyed to some other owner years from now. But the plan would still be in place. The ordinance would still be in place. And we would suggest to you that because of these site-specific approval processes, which are pretty rigorous, as Mr. Pennington described, these things are not going to pop up overnight. There'll be a site-specific approval process for it. And that's where a lot of the negotiation takes place. It doesn't really take place at the zoning level. And so that's, yes, you're right, but but the same processes would still be in place.
You keep mentioning the word trust. It's not that we don't trust the plan, is once you rezone, you get new owners in, can we trust the new owners?
Well, I think there you have to rely on your plan and your ordinances to make the new owners do the right thing.
And saying that, if we rezone, once it's rezoned, we really have no say to what the owners can do and what they can't do because
Well,
it's already been rezoned.
You may not have a say, but the Board of Adjustment sure does. And I've had many projects go before the Board of Adjustment, and it's a fairly low threshold to get there too. I can't get to it right off the top of my head, but it doesn't take much of a building or many buildings to trigger the requirement for a planned unit development, which requires a special use permit. It's a pretty rigorous review process. And any owner would be subject to that.
If it's helpful to the board, from a recent zoning action perspective, we did the Pratt and Whitney approval through a special use permit. There was a section of that was zoned R3 to employment. There's also a substation serving the Pratt and Whitney facility that's in the R3 section, and the county has plans to partner with AV Tech in the future to do a training facility that will occur in the EMP section near Pratt and Whitney. And that's to train workers for the specialized manufacturing jobs. Recently, a bridge was built across to access Pratt and Whitney, which many of you all have seen. And in the future, there will be an interchange built at 26, and that's a DOT project that's funded and still in the design phase at this time.
Any further discussion? As much as we might like to, I don't think there's ever going to be a way for us to figure out what all the what ifs can be. We're just going to have to go with our gut and soul sort reasoning ability on all of this. So a different board could come up with a much different conclusion than the one we'll reach today, but that doesn't make any decision better or worse than the other. It just means the decision it is. So if we're ready to formalize a vote, I would like to go over our basis for making a decision, just in the hopes that might clarify what we're doing here. The board must determine if there is a reasonable basis for the requested change in light of its effect on all involved, including the following considerations. The requested change does not directly or indirectly result in the creation of spot zoning. The size of the tract in question, and maybe a really important one to us, is the compatibility of the change with the adopted 2043 comprehensive plan. Benefits and detriments resulting from the change for the owner of the newly zoned property, their neighbors, and the surrounding community. Relationship between the uses envisioned under the new zoning and the uses currently present in the adjacent tracts. And the following options are available to us. We can recommend approval of the proposed rezoning as presented. We can recommend approval of a portion of the proposed rezoning, or we can recommend denial of the proposed rezoning as presented.
Just a reminder before the vote to close the public hearing.
Just a reminder before the vote to close the public hearing.
Thank you. Should I do that now?
If you guys are ready to discuss and recommendation.
All right, then the public hearing is now closed and we will move to vote.
So this is a question of procedure. You can make a motion to approve as entire. If that passes, then if not, then we move to the next.
Or I think you can just move to, well, how is that done, correct?
Since there are three options, taking one at a time. So if I were to make a motion to approve the zoning as presented, and that passes, we're done. If it doesn't pass, then we go on to the next option.
We can do it that way, or you can just make a motion if there's one option that you prefer.
The one for you.
Just need to close it. Have a vote with them.
So I would move to approve ZPH 2023-00027. It's compatible with the Top 2043 comprehensive plan.
I second.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Then the motion passes.
Who seconded the motion to approve? Okay.
And I guess that concludes this matter of business. So thank you all for being here. We do appreciate everyone's interest. Ms. Fordout, thank you very much for bringing all that you brought to us. We really appreciate that. And we can go on as well. You had an excellent presentation. We appreciate it. And we do have a little bit of more discussion to follow up on today from our last meeting. One of the things that got discussed outside of the public hearings was our attendance policy. And it was brought up in the last conversation that a lot of people, I guess I put it that way, because looking at the data that Terry keeps, a lot of us have missed several meetings. And the new, I'll have to start with that, the new attendance policy states that regular attendance is critical to the success of the board's business and purpose. All appointed board members are expected to attend a minimum of 75% of all regular scheduled meetings each year. Failure to meet this attendance requirement may result in a recommendation by the board to the Board of Commissioners that the board member be removed. And I think that one thing that we didn't think of as a board when that happened was, since we've gone to meeting just once per month, that means 12 meetings a year, which essentially means if we miss 3 meetings, then we're dropping below the 75%. Or if we miss more than 3 meetings, we're dropping below 75% attendance. So that could apply to a whole lot of us sitting here. And we need to think about whether we want to leave it that way or whether we want to make changes to that, because as it's written, it doesn't say if you're sick, it doesn't count, or if you have a job issue, it doesn't count. It just states that if you miss that many, then theoretically, we could ask for you to be removed. Now, I don't think that we would be that critical in how we look at this, but
I think maybe if we put in something, if you miss 3 consecutive meetings unexcused, and we need to put in maybe an excuse policy, what would we consider to be excusable? And if you miss 3 consecutive meetings without the criteria, then we would still.
Or even reach out to the
Yes.
person that's
Yes.
out. Just kind of say, hey, look, we missed you last week.
Or if we could reach out, if you're having some difficulties, you could reach Ms. Rogers and let her know. Just like, your RSVP, if you're not going to be here, and you could reach out, to say, whatever your excuse is.
I like the excuse part. I think it's possible for a member to have a medical emergency and be out for 3 months or be in the hospital for 2 of those months and 1 month out. So some distinction between just flat out missing meetings and checking in with the chair, checking in with the planning department to let them know that you're experiencing something that prohibits your attending.
It also seems to beg for some kind of can't think of the word, not sort of warning. So you're on probation. If you've missed 2 or you miss a 3rd one, then you may be able to review it. I don't want to get too complicated. Do we have any best practice?
Yeah, I was going to recommend, well, what Nancy had brought up is key. I mean, there used to be 2 meetings a month. So you might want to re-examine look at the drop in the threshold, might be 75 to 50. You can certainly, and it's well within, unless Kirk kicks me under the table, you have bylaws. You're welcome to amend those bylaws, but what might be helpful to you is we could go check in with the clerk and check to see what other boards and committees are doing, and then bring you back something that, like a menu to choose from. And then you all decide. I would recommend on the whole excused absence thing, we have 2 attorneys that sit here, attorneys conflict out on things. You might want to give yourself some flexibility that it could be just a call to Terry, hey, I'm sick, I've got something going on. And, that way it doesn't you guys don't have to be put in a position to like, hey, can so-and-so be excused? Do they have this? Because we all know how these things happen. They happen right before the meeting sometimes. Would you all like us to bring you what some of the other boards and committees are doing?
I just assume
I get-
not reinvent this ourselves.
Yes.
Well, and I guess it's where I'm getting is that I'm just not seeing the problem. May recommend. I think if someone has a medical emergency that keeps them, we're not gonna recommend. Kind of goes back to the trust thing, we're talking about earlier in the first proposal. If we want to add some excused absences, I think that's fine. That doesn't really bother me, but I'm just not worried about you all getting it wrong. And I like the 75% expectation for us. If you're missing more than 25 to 30% of the meetings that I hope we're going to be having over the next year, you're missing a whole lot. And so I guess I'm fine with the restricted or excused absences. I'm just saying.
Or at least if communication is still being said.
Yeah, if someone's not showing up, we're gonna know they're not responding to Terry, they're not coming, they're not giving a reason, that's where the may comes in and would make a recommendation, so.
And so in saying that, where do we stand with Mr. Taylor?
I'll get to that in just a minute. But I think that's the crux of the problem is really the communication, because if we're not RSVPing, and this is all of us, if we're not RSVPing Terry to say, yes, I'm going to be at that meeting, that's placing everybody in a very bad place. It's making the people who are bringing the request before the board in a bad place too, because they can't depend on us being here. So that's essential. And we all need to get that if we don't already. I did reach out to Mr. Taylor. I told him, that we were going to be having this conversation, and that's all I know. So that's where we are with that.
And if it pleases the board too, another thing that is absolutely done is when it comes to reappointments, the commissioners get a copy of the attendance. So that is something that's forwarded to them. I would suggest using the term may, because it's up to them. Otherwise, it puts you in a situation of you all having to take an action. So that's just something else you might want to consider as well. Staff has no opinion on this. We're only here to bring you information for you all to decide how you want to govern your body.
And for what it's worth, when I had a conflict today, I'm still in attendance, even though I had a conflict.
That's true.
Even if I'd have walked out the door, I still would have been in attendance for the meeting, though I had a conflict.
I do want to point out for the attorney aspect of it, though, there are times where we have rules of court that we have to comply with, and that could be an issue. So we'd like to see that reflected in there. And I think given the fact that we've been dealing with this for a while, I don't think it's urgent that we do anything today. I would be for one, interested in seeing what
Okay.
Mr. Pennington would bring back to us and review this next month, separate and apart from any issue with Mr. Taylor.
Sure. And just if we could request a little more time on that, just because we're getting ready to enter the holidays, could we maybe potentially bring you back some information in January?
Yes,
Thank you so much.
take the time you need.
February, it's fine.
Are we anticipating any projects in December? How many?
I'm about to talk about that. if that's okay. So this is isn't on the agenda, but we have gotten the go-ahead from management to start the text amendment process. So just to let you know, per input from the commissioners, the first text amendment we are going to be looking at is vacation rentals. So we plan to send you the memo regarding vacation rentals coming up in probably the next week or so. And then we will be providing you a presentation at the December meeting. Also at the December meeting, we're going to be going over the text amendment process. And if you guys have read your comp plan, there's a lot of direction for a lot of different text amendments in that comp plan. So staff has broken those text amendment into modules, or we call them buckets, if you want to think of them as buckets of different related text amendments. So at the next meeting, we will start with a presentation regarding what those modules are. And then we will go into a presentation regarding our first text amendment, which will be short-term rentals or vacation rentals, however you want to call it. Just to let you know, the commissioners are going to look at those modules at their December 5th briefing. So we're going to get feedback from them. But we are moving forward. So Merry Christmas. I'm bringing you lots of text amendments at the December meeting.
Gift or a lump of coal?
Yeah,
I'm
I think
not
that's a really good
sure.
question.
I'm not sure. It's a gift.
12th day of Christmas being
Yeah.
brought to me.
And
When
is
will we-
this going to bring the need for more meetings, or how does that?
So the commissioners have requested and management has requested that we try to move through that short-term rental amendment pretty fast. So we've requested to Nancy, if it's okay with you guys, that we have 2 meetings in January and 2 meetings in February. We might not need them. It's all dependent on how much you want to discuss that first text amendment, the short-term rentals. But to be on the safe side, we'd like to schedule 2 special meetings. It would be it's the 3rd. It's
Normally the third Monday.
yeah. So we
That's
sort of do
fine.
your old schedule. We do the first Monday and the 3rd Monday.
That's Martin Luther.
Well,
Yes.
no. It's the next. It's the week after that.
With the Martin Luther King is.
Yes. So
That's normally our normal.
so we have it the next Monday. It's on
Which is the 22nd.
Yes. I will send you guys, we have the new schedule. It's just not on the website yet, but I'll send it to you guys. But that is correct. So the 22nd.
So
And that would be the only meeting in January, because the first Monday in January would be there's 5 Mondays.
We'll provide you some options. Nothing's set in stone yet.
Okay.
Well, and I guess,
I would suggest the 8th and the 22nd.
so
The first-
2 meetings in January?
Yes.
Depends on what the Christmas gifts from the board looks like.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So if I'm understanding, this will be a regular and a special call.
Yes.
Okay. So we're not changing our regular
No.
meeting schedule. When do you anticipate being able to get whatever the proposal would be for the vacation rental stuff?
So let's do it this way, because let me just put this out there. So we anticipate you'll have a discussion first. In terms of the way text amendment processes work, you'll have staff recommended language changes. However, we understand, and this is just like Congress. 2 houses have to come together. Staff will make recommendations. You'll weigh in. You'll probably have changes. What we want to do is capture it in a way that makes sense. Staff, planning board feedback. It'll go then to the commissioners with those track changes, because commissioners, and I assure you this is how it always works, they're going to have some things. And then we have to come together. So that's the general process for how that's going to look. but we're going to start with the discussion. And then Jillian can better articulate when exactly we'll provide the language that you're.
So the language and how we are doing it, if you remember when we did the comprehensive plan, there was a memo and we tracked the changes in the memo that went to the Board of Commissioners. So we'll do that with the text amendment processes. So you'll have a memo regarding what research we looked at, the equity analysis, then your proposed changes, your staff recommended changes. And you'll see in the memo, there's a second section for planning board review of those staff proposed changes. And so first meeting I will probably get you out the memo next week, I'm guessing. And we want to have our other departments review those changes, fire marshal, building permits, environmental health, have them look at them, make sure there's no conflict with other ordinances. And then I'll have you the memo next week. At that December meeting, again, we'd present the buckets to you, and then we'd present the process, just so we're all on the same page as for the process for a text amendment. And then we do a presentation regarding our proposed recommended staff proposals for short-term rentals. And you guys would have time to provide us with questions and discuss it at that point. Then we'd have 4 scheduled meetings to keep that discussion going and come to a consensus regarding the changes. And then so you'd have 3 meetings to sort of discuss. And then that last one is this public hearing.
And so, just so the different buckets if I understand that correctly, that's your proposed, here's the different buckets of text amendments that we want to address, in which order as well?
Yes.
Okay. And these 4 meetings that you're talking about are just really the vacation rentals, not
Yes.
all of the buckets?
No.
Okay.
It will take years
Yeah.
for these proposed text amendments.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair,
I'm,
I hate to break up the party, but I need.
That's right. We're okay with that, right?
Yes. Yeah, we've got quorum, so
I think
we're good.
that's all
We're
we're
good.
doing. The
Yeah.
buckets are just similarly grouped text
Items.
amendments that make sense. So if you're doing like design and operation standards, you'd want to review those at one time. So
And we can hear about the reconciliation process.
the Congress.
It's December 18th is our next, is that right? Next meeting is December 18th?
yeah.
How's that for a doubt or don't today?
Probably more than we bargained for.
I had my homework.
Well, that's what I wonder about a December meeting. I'll just share. I mean, I hear so many times when things get put on a December meeting for a board like this, that is an approach to dump a bunch of things on people when they're otherwise planning for the holidays. And I know that's not staff's intention. But, and I don't mean from the board perspective, I mean from the community perspective. And I know we'll take this up in January and February, so we have plenty of time, but it just has that, and have that quality of feeling.
So the December meeting will only be process review and bucket review, and then the introduction to vacation rentals.
The memo is just gonna really more outline issue, get the conversation started. It is not meant to dump the time mechanics and the language to you.
No.
And there won't be like a rezoning or anything like that in December. It's just gonna be this.
You don't have any, no, just this. I'll bring cookies. How's that? If I bring cookies, will you come?
We can do that. Yeah, sure. Cookies and coffee?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, Christmas cookies and coffee if you come on December 18th and talk about short-term rentals with us.
And I may probably bring Lamar Jr. clerk's board to the January or February board, just because he works with all the boards and committees. So I might bring him in as a guest to further the conversation about it.
Oh, great, yeah.
Yeah.
More information, better.
Right, okay.
And just before you guys leave, did the iPads work correctly this
Yeah,
time?
they did.
Okay, I just want to make sure. We fixed it.
Time out.
Still there?
Perfect.
That was my millennial staff member. I couldn't figure out how to do it.
I guess if there's nothing else, then our meeting is adjourned.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, very good.
Thanks, y'all.